I have a question for you. How many of you think that you have a right to grow food in the United States of America? It's not a trick question. It seems like it's a pretty basic right when it comes to life, liberty, property. But believe it or not, a lot of courts and a lot of judges and people who are supposed to be enforcing our Constitution don't actually believe that we have a right to grow food. But it's an interesting question. You know, if you're not allowed to grow food on your property, what does that say about property rights? What does that say to your right to liberty and happiness? The reason why I'm bringing this conversation up is because in Maine, they actually have it in their state constitution that you have a right to grow food. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean you have a right to grow vegetable gardens? Maine is one of the only states that actually has a right to grow food. That's just a broad interpretation. You can grow chickens, you can grow rabbits, you can grow a vegetable garden. There are a lot of states that have, you know, the right to grow a vegetable garden, but not every state has a right to just simply grow food. Some of you who live in neighborhoods, who live in cities, who live in towns, you probably know that your town, your city, they all have ordinances. For example, in Raleigh, you're allowed to have hens. In Cary, you're not allowed to have hens. Even if you're allowed to have hens in Raleigh, you're not allowed to keep a rooster. All of these are sources of food, even if you're just raising a few hens for eggs to feed your family. Some of you probably remember the conversation we had on here about the lady in Colorado who is being forced to tear down her greenhouse. You know, a lot of people had a lot of things to say about that, but the fact is that her neighbor just happens to be on the town council and decided, you know what, I don't like this greenhouse here, so we're going to sue her because I have power and she doesn't. There are states actually where they have laws that allow people to have chickens until their neighbor complains, and then their neighbor gets to decide whether or not they have chickens. So be nice to thy neighbor. Depending on where you live, the laws could be very different. So like in Michigan, for example, the village of Beverly Hills had an ordinance in place that prohibited domestic livestock animals on your property. And they just kind of said to somebody, you can't have chickens because they're domesticated livestock. Michigan courts actually ruled in favor of the owners of the chickens because they said this is too broad. Somebody could have chickens as pets. Your laws are too broad. You can't do that. Anyway, so let's talk about this case in Maine, because Maine, like I said, they actually have a law that says that you have the right to grow food. And it goes beyond the garden. It goes to small livestock like chickens for eggs, for protein, because in order to be food sovereign, you actually need to have some sort of protein. Everybody is calling for a much colder, stormier winter. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that there could be possible power outages and some very long, dark days, because as you know, the days are only getting shorter from here on out. Yanasa Trading Co. has finally launched its bee yard collection. This is where we're going to be selling some of our honey as well as some of our other beeswax products. We currently have natural beeswax candles for sale on Yanasa Trading Co. These candles last about 10 hours each. They're clean burning. Unlike paraffin candles that put toxins into the air, beeswax candles actually help neutralize the air. So when you are sitting inside for long periods of time, the power's out, you're having to use other heating resources, beeswax candles can help with air quality inside your home. Not to mention they'll give you plenty of light. We only use beeswax candles in our household because we care about our health, we care about our children's health, and we like the smell of warm honey in the dead of winter. Check out Yanasa Trading Co. and order your beeswax candles today. I think it's interesting, you know, this country, when it was founded, people came over here on boats. They homesteaded in order to eat, in order to live. Over the years, we've been alienated from that. We have started buying all of our stuff from grocery stores. A lot of people don't realize food still comes from farms. And because we buy everything from grocery stores, everybody's very separated from what it actually takes to make food. You know, my wife and I have been working on potatoes, preserving potatoes lately. There's a lot of effort that actually goes into creating food. When you buy at the grocery store, a lot of this is mechanized to make it much cheaper. It's cheaper for your time, cheaper for your efforts, and we're all distracted by currency. We're enslaved by currency. So we have to go to work. We have to work every single day to earn money to be able to pay our bills. The entire system has basically been rigged against us from taking care of our basic needs like food. But like I said, when this country was founded, and we had a right to life, liberty, and property, that right, I would think, included growing your own food, since most of the people in this country had to grow their own food. Telling somebody that they could have land, but they can't use it for a vegetable garden. You can't have a vegetable garden in your front yard. You can't raise chickens. You can't have a few pigs. In a way, that's the taking of private property, to come in and say, you can't do this. We're taking away what you can use your property for. We all know that these laws are in place throughout the United States. Heck, I did a video last year on a 16-year-old beekeeper in Wake Forest who received a cease and desist letter for having honeybees. Think about it. It's ridiculous if you think about it. Now, Calais, Maine, C-A-L-A-I-S. I tend to butcher the English language sometimes, so if I get that wrong, correct me, feel free in the comments. In 2024, they passed a law prohibiting domestic livestock. Didn't completely eliminate it. If you had over a half an acre of land, you could have a chicken coop, as long as you had the proper 20-foot setback and you only had about 6 hens. Don't do more than 6 though. 6 is it. The problem with this functionality is that most in-town lots, in this particular town of Maine, don't have a half an acre or more. They don't have the ability to have 20-foot setbacks. So the Olivers are a family that have been raising chickens in this town for themselves, for their own self-reliance, so that they could have eggs, that they could have some protein when they need it. They argued that the town's laws violated their right to grow food, which is in the Constitution of the state of Maine. Like I said, the state of Maine is really the only state that has this right to grow food clause. There are other states, as I said, that allow you to grow vegetable gardens, but none that say that you have a constitutional right within the state to grow food, to raise food. So Maine's Article 125 recognizes an unalienable right to food, including the right to grow, raise, harvest, produce, and consume the food of one's own choosing, subject to limits against trespass, poaching, or abuses of property and public resources. So it sounds like they will actually win this one, but this is the first time that a state that has in their constitution this particular right to grow food is going to have to be challenged in court because of some towns' ordinances that say, sorry, you can't do that here.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American-made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.
But before I read this case, I was like, what state has to have a right to grow food? I mean, think about it. Why should we have to have in the Constitution a right to grow food? It seems like that's covered in the Bill of Rights, depending on who interprets it, but it is not. As I've stated in this video, you have all of these town ordinances, you have the ability of government to take away your right to grow food at any given moment in time. You do not have the right to be self-sustainable. I think this poses a lot of bigger questions looking at the future. As we moved into more processed foods, more lab-grown foods, and more patented food products that can replace what they consider harmful to the environment, like meat, at what point are we going to be told we can't grow our own food? You're already told you can't buy food from your neighbor, the person you know across the street. You can't go to your neighbor and buy his meat, well, in many states you can buy the eggs, you can buy poultry up to a certain extent. But there are a lot of things that you can't buy from your neighbor because of state and federal laws, state and federal regulations. You don't even have the right to choose where your food comes from. If you want raw milk, you don't have that right. Anyway, guys, I thought this was an interesting topic of conversation. Should we as US citizens have the unalienable right to grow food? Are as many of you surprised as I am that we don't? I never even really thought about it that way, but we don't. A lot of states have right to farm laws, but those protect commercial operations from nuisance suits. They don't necessarily protect a small homesteader, a small farmer. If you watched my video last weekend, I talked about PMAs and how the government has been going after PMAs, which are private membership associations, co-ops where people can buy food from within their co-op once they're a member. It's private, it's not open to the public. Generally, in order to join one of those organizations, you have to sign some paperwork and become a member to let people know that you are an informed consumer. You're making these choices knowing that there are risks involved, but you're buying directly from the farmer. And as I've always pointed out, there's a lot of risks going to the grocery store. If we don't have the unalienable right to grow food, are we truly free? Do we have liberty? Do we have the right to prosperity and happiness? Some would say, well, you have the right to go buy land wherever you wanted to, but the system traps us in many ways. It's too expensive for a lot of people. People have to work, they have to be near cities. If you have a system of law governed around currency that prohibits people from being able to move somewhere where they can exercise their basic human needs and rights, that's not liberty either. Anyway, guys, I read that story about this family in Maine, and I had to do a quick video on it because I thought it was the most interesting thing. But when you think about it, we actually do not have the right to grow food. It just seems so basic that we should have that right, but it can be taken away from us at any moment in time by any city ordinance, and it's constantly happening. It's happening all the time. They're getting stricter and stricter and stricter on who's allowed to garden, who's allowed to have chickens. It's a bit ridiculous.
Many of you have noticed that we keep wearing these leather patch hats that say defend the right to farm on them. These leather patch hats support our nonprofit, Meet My Neighbor Productions. You can get your hat at Yanasa Trading Co. and help us defend the right to farm through education, outreach, and, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, farm relief efforts. So get your leather patch hat and let others know that you defend the right to farm.